Welcome to the Lord of the Flies, pages 35 to 71 reference summary. Mr. White at it again. We're just trying to keep us kind of focused in one direction. The goal of this is to realize that we're looking way beyond this novel as just a tale of what happens when a bunch of delinquent lads end up getting stuck on an island and they're mean to each other and terrible things happen. Okay, that's the plot that you can get out of it if you are unguided and you are left to your own devices. But what if somebody was to point out to you that there's a lot of symbols going on in this thing, and there's a lot of there's even the way that it's written, where the author has the boys making mistakes that older, smarter, wiser, more careful people wouldn't make, and it makes you cringe. And when you see it happen, you go, "Oh, that I know what that means. Something bad's gonna happen because of that." Okay, what that is it starts to get us into the idea of symbols. That there's a lot of symbols going on in this thing, and try to read it with an idea that we're going to write that paper at the end. How do all these symbols, how do these symbols, you pick which symbols, prove a theme, a moral or lesson that the author wants you to learn from reading the work. You pick the theme, you pick the symbols, prove the theme. That's the goal. That's a lot. We got a lot going on with this one. Okay. Fire on the Mountain. Not too many links, but this is what I believe to be a rainforest type situation. It looks like it could have some eucalyptus in there, though, so that might have some Australian outback look to it, though. It was as close as I could get. They definitely do have them. It happens after droughts. They have enormous growth, but the plants get used to a large amount of water. What happens when all the water just was to stop for 6 months and everything is just used to it? It will continue to respire as if everything's normal, and it'll suck up all the groundwater, and once that's gone, desiccation. Everything dries out tremendously. Bigger plants with trunks, they might be able to survive for a while and keep their water in. Smaller plants, it just is going to keep drying out from them and leaving them and going out into the air, and they lose all ability to stay alive, and they die, and then they become tinder and very, very flammable. Of course, we know this. We live in Simi. Here's your picture of your forest fire that's actually on what I believe to be more of like a tropical setting. You can see stuff like that. If I've went to Maui and I've seen the fields looking dry, like they could go up real easy. Piggy was right. They don't know how many little uns there were, whatever, and only how many they have now, and that's only if they check. And they think that the one with a birthmark on his face that was near his eye or something like that, raspberry colored, I believe he was described as. They think the one with the birthmark has gone missing, and they don't want to say it, but probably burned up in the fire. They say maybe he went back to camp, but the way that it's worded, it's pretty much insider information told to you by the author. Everybody knows that one was probably lost because of their thoughtlessness and carelessness. One has already died due to accident. And again, freakishly, weirdly, they won't see the body. They don't ever find it. They don't go looking. They just know that he's not showing up anymore, and he had a mark on him. They learn to keep the fire lower so they don't burn up all their wood and lose control of the fire after this. They learn the lesson, but it doesn't transfer later, sadly, that it's all bad to use this kind of technique. As the fire burns, the little ones are frightened of what appears to be snakes, which are vines, exploding from a flaming tree, which is falling over and giving the flaming falling vines a look of that. The older kids realize that the kid with the birthmark is not around after the forest fire. Some of them can see the danger. such as those two incidences, and some of them cannot. Some of them see it for what it is, some of them get fooled by it and get confused or tricked or end up fearing nothing. So if they're old enough, they're not scared of it. They know they're upwind and away from it. It's burning that way because that's how it got started. They're not going to try and stop it. It's just going to burn until it hits the edge of the island and stops. They are not knowledgeable enough to even know when they're making a really bad error. They don't even, so they're like it's like somebody walking into a minefield and not even knowing what a landmine is. It's completely, it's almost sad to see that. And the author is very effective at that, again, making me cringe because I see so many things that they were going to do wrong, and then they happen. Sure enough, they go wrong. So they don't know when they're making these errors, like burning up all of the wood carelessly or burning the forest needlessly, so we no longer have the cover for the pigs. We no longer have the fruit that generates food not only for us but also for the pigs. We didn't need to lose that. That was very bad. We don't even know that it was bad other than, oops, we burnt the forest. I mean, they're not thinking on the level of, you don't know how bad that was even. The scar, we've got a picture. So this is when an airplane hits a crash, and if there's anything around it or in the way, it also tears it up, including, if we're talking about a large plane that goes intercontinental, as a bunch of British boys would ending up tropical, would have to be a big, long trip intercontinental, long ways away from someplace. And they end up going over some tropical island, and that's when they crash land. And when they crash land, so you can see the scar from this one. So let's say this is the mountain still, and this is where it first hits, and it skids down the hill to the beach. And then when there's a hurricane, the wind comes from this direction and carries it off into the water and away, and it disappears. That's kind of what happened. And this scar goes up the mountain a ways. And the pilot made it over the other side of the mountain when he decided to drop it into the forest. Which is probably what would have saved them, because if he went straight into the mountain, that's bad. At angles, that's just bad. Mountains are rocks. So that's all bad. We got some of the pinnacles going on in the background that I've had up here from pages 1 and 2 of this presentation. And the pinnacles are also explained in this. That also sets us up to be probably in the tropical islands type of thing. The way that they're describing everything, it sure sounds like it in this setting. Anyway, the scar is starting to take on symbolic meanings. It's literally a failing piece of modern civilization technology cutting a path through the forest. So that's a big time. How can it be more of a symbol? But we don't know what it means yet. Right? The scar itself is it changing? Is it gonna change? Is it gonna fade? Is the forest gonna reconsume the scar? Is it gonna disappear entirely? Scars, they're from injuries. They're the remains of an injury. They're the reminder of an injury. They have interesting properties. So we will have to think about the scar as over time and see about that. Ralph and Piggy try to keep everyone building shelters and keeping the fire going, but laziness and the thrill of the hunt pull each kid away from those tasks. So, you can imagine what any type of driftwood shelters are. It might take a great deal of effort to put something up, and when you're done, you've got something that's like this. It's nothing like, amazing. You worked all for a lot and then you're not sure how strong it is and if you want to be in it. You'll want to be in it if it's raining, but will you want to be in it if it's like blasting heavy wind? It might fall down on you. So, but building shelters. In case of the hurricane, he's trying to build something that will sustain a hurricane, and that's tough. And keeping the fire going, and then all of the other mundane tasks. Bathroom over there. Don't go in the eating trees over here. Um, Everybody use a coconut. Get coconuts from the tree. Here's rocks. Get the coconuts from the tree. Knock them down. Bust them open. Get something to eat. Use that as your bowl to drink from. And use that to catch the water. Don't go in there with your mouth and with your hands and everything drinking out of the same thing, because it actually will spread it more. You'll constantly be having to put your mouth in there, etc. And also you can scoop and you can get certain water that doesn't have dirt versus water that does, depending if you have a bowl. So there's a lot of good reasons for that stuff. All the little things that they're supposed to start doing, and that I mentioned a lot of those in the lecture. I'm not going to go into them all here. The little ones are frightened and have nightmares all the time now, as if this were not a good island. And they're like, there's always this question: is this a good island or is this not a good island? The little ones are developing into a stock character type, all of them collectively. They are scared of the dark easily. They're easily led into any conclusion with no critical thinking skills. You can talk them into stuff with just nonsense words, and they'll just follow along. They'll just tootle along. Okay, whatever you say, and that's kind of a character type. Simon wanders off to have a little alone time, and we learn that about him. He hides in the forest in a thick mat of vines where he can see out, but nobody can see in. And that's kind of symbolic, if you think about it. You can see out, nobody can see you. You're finally alone and private. That's an interesting image. It seemed like it was kind of protective, like he felt like he had to get away and he could finally feel safe in there. Simon is the kid who sometimes faints. We're going to find out later he's got more serious problems than that, probably. When Roger is off fire duty, he hunts the little one named Henry. He sneaks up on him, and he starts throwing pebbles. And he starts throwing the rocks near him without hitting him. And he's described as getting a thrill, because it used to be he'd never dare throw it too close, because then he'd get a sharp, rebuke from any adult nearby. Don't throw rocks at that little boy. And then it would be all over him. But now that there's no one around, he can kind of throw a little closer than before and then hide behind the tree and make the kid turn around and look. And Henry can't figure out. And Henry starts laughing, thinking somebody's playing with him. The way that it's described, it sounds like Roger is playing with him, but it's got a darker tone. The way that it's written, if you read it, you can see that there's something a little darker going on with Roger. That might have relevance later in the book. Jack realizes he might be seen by the pigs, so he creates a camouflage and a mask to hide his face and to break up his outline. And then he starts to feel and act different now that he wears a mask and camo. He's a mask because he's got all the charcoal and the stripes from the clay, and so he's got multiple different colors to blotch up his outline, so he looks like he blends into the forest. He doesn't want to look like a pink thing underneath the trees. They see me and then they run away. So he wants to cover all up. And then he puts these pieces of the forest, little pieces of twigs with branches with little tiny leaves and stuff on them to break up his outline. He sticks those out of his hair. And he calls it, I don't remember the exact wording of it, but it's essentially what we know as camouflage. And he's breaking up his outline. He starts to feel and act quite different after he invents the mask and camo. And he's quite different when he does that. That now he's a different Jack. And he's totally about the here and the now. And if he can get these pigs, then he can supply something that no one else can. And he's the king of it. That's about it for our section. Thank you much.